Hey y'all, my name is Priscilla and welcome back to my channel. So today I have a recent reads video for you. I did one of these for my fiction reads, and I want to talk about nonfiction reads in this video. And this is my attempt at talking about nonfiction on my channel because I am terrible about it for some reason. Even though I read, I think, a fair amount of nonfiction, I definitely want to talk about it more. This is going to be a wrap up of the nonfiction reads that I have read the last couple of months. So the first book that I have to talk about is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Humph. This is a collection of letters written between Helen Humph, who is a writer in New York City and a bookseller in London. And this was not for me, y'all. I think this is a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I did not like this. I was kind of bored to tears while reading this. I thought this was supposed to be a charming story about book lovers corresponding over decades between each other about the love of books. And it is sort of that, but I didn't find it charming at all. Helen Humph has a very cold kind of writing style. She tries to be witty, and I felt like she was trying to get to know these booksellers, but to me it just came off like she was prying, and it came off very pretentious and rude. I just didn't enjoy her voice and how she talked to some of these booksellers, and their correspondence back to her felt very business, very transaction based, whereas she's trying to like get to know them, and it just felt very awkward and not charming at all. So I didn't like it. I didn't really care about a lot of the classics that she was seeking out from this bookseller. I just didn't care, and I don't recommend it for that reason. If you like classics, you might enjoy this more than I did, but for me, it's a no. The next book that I have to talk about is The Curated Closet, a simple system for discovering your personal style and building your dream wardrobe by Anuschka Rees. Whew, that's a long title. Nonfiction has some of the longest titles, but you pretty much know what this book is about from that title. It is sort of a self-help fashion book, and it's also very beautifully designed. I actually want to buy a version of this because it is just such a minimal classic style to it. And Anuschka Rees is a Berlin-based fashion blogger. She has a very massive, successful blog. And she also has a social psychology background. So she, like I think most young adults, has a closet full of clothes, but she felt like every morning she would go to and have nothing to wear. So she dives into the fashion industry, the marketing practices and methodology to become more of a conscious consumer, and also become more stylized and defining what your style is and what kind of message you want to send with what you wear. So I really enjoyed this, and I was turned on to this actually by a podcast that I really like called By the Book, which is a podcast that is sort of a comedy, sort of self-help, where they read a book and they live by it for 2 weeks, and they come back and report, and they read messenger letters. It's really great, and they really love this book, so I really wanted to read it because of them. And I am so glad that I did, because I went through all the steps, and I really feel like I have a better idea of my style now. So the steps are: you define what you wear in a week. You kind of pay more close attention to the items that you pick at random. And then you start to create a digital library, a digital fashion journal of items that you think you like. So I went to Pinterest and made a Pinterest board of all these fashion items and clothes and outfits that I like. And you constantly are editing it, by the way. It's definitely a living, breathing document. Then you go to the shopping stores and you actually try things on that you think fit this style. And you slowly start to define more and more what you like. And I like that methodology because it's a continuous process. It's not something that you're going to do in a weekend for sure. And then you start to detox your closet and start to throw things out that, for instance, you haven't worn in 2 years, or items that you say you're going to wear but still have the tags on them, which I think is something we all do. Well, I definitely do. So this book is definitely very introspective. And I like self-help books that are like that, and that take into account also privilege, because she definitely talks about how this shouldn't be done all in a day. Sometimes things just don't fit right, and you need to take them to be tailored, or you need to sew on a new button. You don't have to throw everything out and then waste a whole bunch of money to buy a whole new closet. That is not the message here. But again, I really like the idea that quality and fit are the primary focuses of creating a style that maybe you didn't think you liked before because quality and fit weren't priorities. A lot of the times when you go shopping, you pick things that are bargain and they're not necessarily of quality or fit that are going to work for you. A con of this book, the actual look of the book, the models that are used while being racially diverse, which I was very happy to see, are not diverse in terms of body shape. They all are definitely tall, very thin, and I feel like if the message here is to wear clothes that fit your body, you should definitely include some diversity in shapes. I would have liked to have seen a more curvier women or plus size women, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it if you're interested in anything fashion related. The next book that I had to talk about is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I don't think this really needs an introduction. Everybody knows about Becoming. I really enjoyed it. I think it was one of the first 5-star reads that I read this year. It just is everything that I want out of a memoir. It's told in 3 parts: becoming me, becoming more, us becoming more. And in the first part, you hear a lot about her education and being raised by her parents and her brother. I really identified with her discussions around academics and being a person of color in higher education and the struggles that she had with that. And I really felt like the most well-written parts are definitely in the this section where she talks about growing up before she met Barack. So I felt like those parts of the books definitely felt more intimate than the post presidency parts. So I really liked also hearing about her struggles with Barack and their marriage, because you often get this perception that just strong, powerful women like Michelle Obama are superhuman and they can do it all. They can, but they don't. They do it with sacrifice. They do it with people supporting them. A lot of her support is why Barack is able to be the president, why he was able to campaign so hard full time and get the support that he got for his presidency. So I liked hearing all of that, because being a full-time mom, a full-time lawyer, a full-time wife is not easy, and you see a little bit of that in her story. So yeah, I don't know what to say about this book that hasn't been said already. It's just great, and I highly recommend it if you like memoirs. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is called Reset: My Fight for Inclusion and Lasting Change by Ellen Pio. So back in 2015, Ellen Pio sued a venture capitalist company that she worked for called Klein & Perkins. It was the result of the discrimination that she faced while working for this company. She was one of the only people of color and one of the few women of color, I think the only woman of color, that worked for the company, and she just saw and was treated so unfairly by the white men that she worked with. And she discusses a lot of the diversity and inclusivity issues that she faced and that women face in the workforce, not only in tech industry, but just across the board, that women face day to day in corporate settings. For instance, they never interviewed Black folks the entirety that she was there. I believe she was there for 7 years, and they didn't interview Black people for some reason. They would only interview women of Asian descent because racism. And there was also another part that she talked about this cultural sensitivity training that they underwent, and hearing these men, their questions of how they were trying to work around discrimination was awful. They asked questions like, how do you ask in interviews, how do you figure out someone is actually 28 years old? And it's just like, you're not supposed to. That's discrimination. That's what this is all about. You can't ask people these things, and you can't hire based on age. She ended up losing the lawsuit, which is really hard to hear, especially with all the crap that she went through during the lawsuit. It was a very public thing. She was under public scrutiny. Her husband was under public scrutiny. He's also bisexual. They attacked him for that, which is so predictable, but so ridiculous. But I really enjoyed hearing her voice and making people aware of these issues that women of color face, and that the gaslighting that you face day to day whenever we mention these issues isn't unfounded. And one big part, one idea that struck me most was this idea of a meritocracy that her Chinese immigrant parents instilled in her, and I feel like many people of color have, that the American dream, that if you come to the United States and that if you follow the rules and if you go to college and if you get your degrees and your experience, and you're going to be successful, right? This is a story that we hear all the time, but that in practice is just not true. There are limits, there are glass ceilings for women, and even more so for women of color to break through. So reading from someone's experience of that just really clicked for me, and I think that a lot of people could get a lot from this memoir. So I highly recommend it if you're interested. Next up, I read Stranger, The Challenge of a Latino Immigrant in the Trump Era by Jorge Ramos, and I actually own that. Yes. Here's the book. This is a memoir from Jorge Ramos, who is an award-winning journalist. He worked many years for Univision, which is a Spanish-speaking network. This book is part memoir, part dissertation, I guess, on identity and what it means to be Latino. He uses the word Latino instead of Latinx in the United States right now, especially with the Trump presidency. This book was also inspired by an event, the picture here on the cover, that took place while Trump was running for presidency back in 2016. He threw Ramos out of a press conference because Ramos was pressing him about his immigration policies, about his recent statements regarding Mexicans being rapists, and about the wall, building the wall, and how is that going to fix anything, and how is he going to pay for it, and how is he supposed to deport the however million people that are actually undocumented back to Mexico and Central America. And Trump didn't want to answer these questions. He got fed up with them and he kicked him out. He had his security detail come and take him out. And as he was exiting, being removed from the press conference, someone yelled at him that, "Get out of my country." Although Ramos is a U.S. citizen, he holds a dual citizenship to Mexico and the United States. So that's what inspired and fueled this whole narrative. This is written more of an essay format. There are discussions all about different topics that were inspired by this event. He talks about his childhood in Mexico, which I loved hearing about, and how he decided to come to the United States to practice journalism without censorship. He critiques Obama's immigration policies even, as he was dubbed the deporter-in-chief at the time, which I thought was really nice to see because that is often overlooked, although Obama did deport a lot of immigrants. There are large sections in this because of the nature of those events, of those topics that are info dumpy, that are very data driven. So those can be a little bit taxing, but I think that are very important, especially with the current climate of our political rhetoric and having to prove all the fake news that is being circulated. So I think those sections are really important. So my favorite parts of this were the last couple of essays that were, there was one in particular written to his children that I really loved. He tells his children to disobey. Anytime you are met with someone that tells you to do something unjust, to do something that is unfair, to do something that you don't agree with, to disobey them. There's so many topics in here that I tabbed off that I want to have discussions with my parents and my grandparents about, because I don't know their stories, and it's often a very traumatic experience for immigrants to come to this country and to live in this country that they don't want to talk about. And I'm really glad this book exists and it speaks to a lot of that. So I definitely recommend this if you want to understand a bit about immigrants like Ramos and the experiences that they face in this country. The issues that I did have with this were very minimal, but they were there. I do think because this is a political take that's so current with Trump's specific policies that it does have a shorter shelf life. Ramos is definitely aware that Latinidad and being Latino is not a monolith, but at times he will say things that I don't agree with, that I don't represent Latinos. For example, I don't think that Ted Cruz is an example of Latinos progressing because he is making moves in the political sphere. I don't think that he really represents a lot of Latino ideals. Yeah, I do have some issues with this, but overall I feel like it did what it intended to do, and I think you could get a lot from it. So I still enjoyed it. And although I feel like it's a very short-lived kind of book. Okay, and the last book that I have to talk about today is Biased: Uncovering the Hidden Prejudice That Shapes What We See, Think, and Do by Jennifer L. Eberhardt. So this is a book written by an expert in social psychology. Eberhardt works with the Oakland Police Department and she also works at Stanford University, but she really is working at easing the relationships between the community and the police department there. The police department there is notorious and has a lot of history with racial discrimination, with violence, and with interactions with the community. So she has a lot of work to do and a lot of unpacking to do in this nonfiction book about bias. And I like that she makes the note early on that you aren't necessarily racist, but you are definitely biased. And you have to recognize that bias often feed into stereotyping processes and to inaccurate associations and actions. So she definitely dives into some of her research. She dives into some of the historical social psychology research. As human beings, you know, we're bombarded with stimulus, so much stimulus day to day, that our brain cannot function properly if we try to process all these things. So our brain naturally categorizes things, naturally groups things. But an effect of this is stereotyping, and another effect of this is inaccurate associations and actions. And it's hard to unprogram those things, because if you're not aware of them, you're just going to keep doing them. So an example of these associations is with immigrants. For some reason, only immigrants are compared and associated with filthy things or with filthy animals like cockroaches and rats. Think about like the influx of the Irish in the early 1900s, or of the influx of Central American and Latinx folks now even, or the classic very dehumanizing association of Black folks with gorillas. There was an interesting part in the book. She's speaking at a conference, and the questions that these intellectuals ask her are, wow, I could not believe that they still think these things. You know, like, well, maybe gorillas are associated with Black folks because of the association with color, of skin color. And like, no, that's not true, because you don't associate brown folks with gorillas. And there are some brown folks that have like very close skin colors to some apes. Like, that's not true. I also particularly enjoyed her personal anecdotes. She will, you know, dive into a lot of research and data and social theory, and then she'll follow up with a conversation with her son. And I really like that. Eberhard is also Black, so she is raising Black sons, Black boys that will become the Black men that she heavily researched. There was one particular instance when she was on a plane with her son, and a Black man with dreadlocks walks onto the plane, and her son turns to her and says, or the plane might be robbed now. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know the exact words, but something to that sentiment. And she turns to her son and says, why do you think that? And her son didn't have an answer. And I thought those personal anecdotes really just drive some of these greater themes and messages home. So the cover and the title of this book will lead you to believe that she will discuss all sorts of bias, you know, weight, skin color, age. And she does touch on some of those, but you won't get a full picture of all of those bias. I don't think you could do that in a book like this. So in short, I don't want to ramble on too much about this. The underlying bias that our society is based on need to be thought about deeply and addressed, and there needs to be a social agenda to make lasting change. All right, hopefully that wasn't too rambly. I will be leaving links to my Goodreads reviews of these books if you'd like to read those. Those are a little bit more coherent. But that is the wrap up that I have for you today for the nonfiction books that I have read recently. If you have read any of these books, or maybe you are interested in reading them now, please leave a comment down below. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Bye.